And real life is important to people because people need to know how to deal with real life.
Well, do you remember what the hell was that thing, the whole series of stuff about, oh man, whole series of stuff about, Appalachia, or whatever, there's a series of books.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Because the Appalachian thing is real close to me because my dad grew up in eastern Kentucky, and the Appalachian thing
Yeah.
is,
Well,
yeah,
there was a whole series of books and stuff about Appalachia and stuff, and man, I can't remember the name of them things. There were like 20 publications came out from that. But
Cool.
It was interviews of
yeah,
the
people.
moonshiners and
Yeah, absolutely, right.
everybody else. So
Yeah, they grew up in that stuff, right? That's it.
you're on camera.
All right, here we go. Okay, well, I'm talking about how way back in, I forget when it was, 1960 something or other, I was a student at the University of Kentucky in Lexington, Kentucky. And I had been sent there because that's the school that I chose to go to, but I'd been sent there because my dad was paying for my education, okay? He went to UK. He went from the University of Kentucky to MIT and graduated as an engineering student. But I always wanted to go to UK because my dad was from Eastern Kentucky, and that's where I wanted to go to school. So here I am. I'm a student at the University of Kentucky, okay? One night, I'm on Friday night or something at the student union, and they had dances at the student union. And here across the room, like in a miracle, I met eyes with a man, a young, handsome man, kind of blonde with a brown corduroy jacket that I just fell in love with. Okay, and he fell in love with me. It's just like in the fucking movies. Okay, well, I didn't happen to notice the beer stain on his jacket because that would have told me if I'd known anything that he was a fucking drunk. He'd been drinking already before he got to the student union dance. But it didn't matter to me because he was handsome and I was in love, and there we go. Okay, well, we sit outside the dance in the student union together, and he tells me how he wants to go into the Peace Corps, and I'm going, oh, hey, man, this is what I want to do. One of these days when I'm not doing anything and I'm older, I want to go into the Peace Corps because I want to pass on to people, this is how you can live instead of the way you've been living. Right? Well, I just totally fell in love with Dave. Well, it went from that to, there's a big a snowstorm in Lexington, Kentucky. He walked all the way from his home in Lexington somewhere to the campus to walk me clear across the campus to the men's dorm where I was a receptionist at the men's dorm at the University of Kentucky. And every day that I was there, I would have students come in, men students to the dorm, pick up their mail, and they had draft notices to go to the Vietnam War. And they would be just devastated, okay? Well, it went on from there to, I actually got pregnant by Dave, and because he actually had an alcohol problem, had an alcohol problem since he was the age of 16, now he was like 23 or something. It came to me that I had to be away from him in order to have my daughter that I was pregnant with, that at the time I didn't know I was pregnant with, but I knew I was pregnant. And I had to go home. And I went home, and when my dad found out that I was pregnant, my mom said to me, don't bring that baby home. And the solution to everybody, all those adults, was that I marry Dave, and he would then continue to work for his dad, who was the painter through whom which he had become an alcoholic in the first place. But I could then marry Dave, and Dave would straighten up and make a home for me and our kid, whether it was a son or daughter or whatever, we didn't know at the time. And I bought it, and my parents didn't have anything to do but throw up their hands and say, well, whatever. And I went back to Lexington. I married Dave February 7th, 1967. And our daughter was born in August that year. But in the meantime, I had left Dave because one night he actually slammed me up against a refrigerator, tore my dress down the front, and had a hunting knife at my stomach. And I said to him, because his name was Cobb, which I, interestingly enough, live in Cobb, California nowadays. I said, Cobb, if you do, I'll kill you. I mean, he's the guy that's got the knife, right? And he dropped the knife, tore my dress down the front, and let me go. I went upstairs. He was passed out on the bed by then. I packed up my stuff, got in my 1957, I think it was, Dodge that my dad had given me, which was my dad's present to my mom, and he called it Baby because it was a lavender and gold Dodge. But he'd given it to us so we could live outside of Lexington and Dave could get away from his drunken friends, which of course didn't happen. So I got in the Dodge. I'm pregnant with my daughter. I'm 5 months pregnant. I drove in a thunderstorm at midnight to Cincinnati, Ohio. I called my aunt and uncle Flo, which was my dad's half-brother and his wife, and said, can you come get me at the bus station? That's the only place I need to go in Cincinnati. And Hubert came down, picked me up, brought me home, and I spent the next couple of days with Flo and Hubert. Hubert and I used to sit out on the driveway and drink a beer while he ate barbecue. And Flo and I would fucking stay up all night long and talk because she'd been through that kind of stuff with previous husbands of hers. Okay, so I go back to Dayton because my parents were out in California at the time looking for whether they were going to retire out here. And Dad, conveniently, like that was Dad's way, he was a planner, set me up across the street in an apartment, a studio apartment for $50 fucking dollars a month. This was back in 1967, so that when my water broke and I was going to have this baby, I could walk across the street to the hospital and have this baby, which worked out really very well because that's the way it worked. So I walked across the street. I had my daughter. At the time, I didn't know it was a daughter or a son. I just remember going into delivery out of my mind and them saying she shouldn't be screaming this much, and they put a gas mask on my face. And I had my daughter, and I woke up and they said, and here's my mom. My mom happened to be there. And they said, my mom said, you have a visitor, and that was Dave, my husband. He was there with me. But my daughter was gone. I never saw her. I've never seen her since. Okay, well, many years later, I did a search for my daughter and found her. In Ohio, which is where I was at the time, is one of the most closed adoption states there is. But I was able to find out that my daughter, Sherry, because I named her Sherry K. Sherry, after my husband's first girlfriend's name was Cheryl. I named her Sherry K, and my sister's name was K-A-E, and my husband, David K. Cobb, K-A-Y, I named her Sherry K, and I gave her into adoption to this it was United Families Adoption Agency, okay? So Sherry was adopted. She was given over to this agency to be adopted. Well, she was fortunately adoptable within 4 months. And like I said, many years later, back in I don't know, whatever it was after my son was born in 86, in the 80s in Los Angeles, I remember talking to my daughter on the telephone because I had found her in Michigan. She was in Michigan, Addison, Michigan, and many, many years after that, I don't know how many it was, I can't remember, but she finally wrote to me and sent her photos of herself and her husband and her daughter, who had been born illegitimately also, because it tends to run in a series. Sherry sent me a photo of all these people saying, it's okay, you could write me now, I'm an adult. Because she was in her 40s, and I just love my daughter, and she loves me, and everything's okay.
Great story. I will send you an approval or the video of this to approve of,
Okay, cool.
you know. You can tell me, put it up or,
No, you can go ahead and put it up. Because honest to God, it's like if people have given their kids up for adoption, because that's my whole thing. I had this ministry I was going to try and do called Quandary, about like you're in a quandary, you're married. I mean, you're pregnant, but you're not married. And what can you do? Okay, I was pregnant, not married. In the first place, I gave up my daughter. In the second place, I kept my son. I chose those two alternatives. I didn't do abortion because then you're killing your child. You know, and from the time your child is conceived, it's your child. You know, so I chose not to do abortion, but I chose to, number one, give up my daughter so she could be adopted by a man and a woman as a father and mother, blah, blah. And the second one, I chose to keep my son to raise as a single mom from the time he was born. And my son is a remarkable man that I'm really, really super proud of. You know, I only give the competence or whatever I was as a mom to God, because that's whom I glorify for all my existence. You know, but Sherry has turned out a remarkable person. In her mid-40s, she's been able to communicate with me, you know, and we leave it at that. I mean, I don't interfere with her life, you know, but I just basically want her to know that I love her, which is basically what I want my son to know from me, and he knows that, because if he did not know that, we would not be as close as we are, and we are.
yeah.
Very close.
So he knows about you giving up your firstborn for
Yeah,
adoption.
that's his half-sister, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, whether Jeremy ever chooses to be in contact with his half-sister, that's entirely up to him.
Yeah.
Because, you know what I mean, as a person in life, you're only a person and you can influence people, but honest to God, you cannot control